Advocating for language acquisition for deaf children, the debate between cochlear implants and the deaf community. The deaf community sees the cochlear implant as a threat to their culture, language, and identity. This is because children with cochlear implants are taught speech, minimizing their chances of learning sign language and being involved in the deaf community. A cochlear implant is a surgically implanted electronic device that provides a sense of sound to a person who is profoundly deaf or severely hard of hearing in both ears. 2 to 3 of every 1,000 children in the U.S. are born deaf or hard of hearing, and more lose their hearing later during childhood. In the U.S. today, more and more children are receiving cochlear implants each year, and the rift between the hearing and the deaf community shows no sign of slowing down. The majority of deaf people do not recognize deafness as a disability. Rather, they identify with their deaf culture. Deaf culture members lead happy and productive lives without hearing or a spoken language. Furthermore, deaf couples today have been known to seek genetic counseling and testing in an attempt to ensure that their children will be born deaf. Today's generation of young deaf people with cochlear implants are at the forefront of a cultural battleground between the hearing and the deaf communities over their language and identity. Finally, even though the deaf culture contradicts this, medical professionals consider deafness a disability, and it still remains true that deafness can result in tremendous disadvantages in society. It is important to keep in mind that having a cochlear implant doesn't always guarantee that a person will be able to hear and speak at a relatively normal level. In some cases, the person with the implant can only hear some environmental sounds. In other cases, children experience harm, not only because they do not experience success with the cochlear implant, but because they are also not provided with exposure to sign language. Some of the pros of cochlear implants are increased level of hearing, it facilitates communication with others, it can make it easier to function in mainstream society. Children who get the implant are often able to function in mainstream schools rather than through specialized schooling for the deaf. They may or may not need to learn sign language based on their level of hearing ability. Another major benefit of having the cochlear implant is safety. Even if the individual is only able to hear some environmental sounds, it often helps them to be more aware of hazards or risks in their vicinity. Being able to hear things like ambulance sirens, a door opening, or someone yelling are a few examples of ways in which cochlear implants could improve the safety and security of the individuals who have received the implant. Some of the cons of cochlear implants include cochlear implants are expensive. The difference between natural sounds and the way sounds are transmitted through a cochlear implant is also considered to be a disadvantage of this technology. And as with any surgery, there is also risk associated with the procedure itself. Children typically have an easier time relearning how certain sounds associate to different people and situations, but adults sometimes have difficulty interpreting the unfamiliar sounds that they hear through a cochlear implant. In the recent decades, since the device has become available, this risk has been minimized, but there is still a chance that the damage to the auditory nerve or facial nerve could occur. Those getting the implant have been encouraged to get immunized for bacterial meningitis since it seems to have a higher incidence among those who have gotten the device. There's a lot of controversy with cochlear implants. The primary controversy within the deaf community regarding cochlear implants concerns the definition of deafness as a disability. The medical community generally regards deafness as a disability that should be treated in whatever way possible. Meanwhile, Many individuals who are deaf feel that deafness is a cultural identity rather than a disability. As a result, they identify closely with the community of deaf individuals and their supporters and feel that the cochlear implants imply that there is something wrong with them that needs to be fixed. Research suggests that the most intensive period of speech and language development is during the first 3 years of life. If a child is not exposed to language during this period, he or she will have more difficulty developing spoken or sign language and reading skills. The medical community, for these reasons, identifying hearing loss as early as possible enables parents to pursue treatment options early so that he or she can learn to communicate with his or her hearing peers. Models of disabilities provide conceptual frameworks for understanding and action that can inform the decision-making process of parents and social workers. The medical model of deafness is viewed as a medical social welfare and cultural notion of the absence of the ability to hear as being an illness or physical disability. The social model of deafness views the disability as oppression, and the disabled agree that this is the environment that disables them. If society was better designed, they would disable less or none at all. There are several types of harms associated with cochlear implantation: harms to the individual, medical harms, societal harms. This is because there is a great deal of misinformation, lack of training, and lack of coordination among medical professionals about the use of speech and sign language with deaf children who undergo cochlear implantation. Specifically, when they are promoting speech-exclusive approaches and denying sign language exposure to a deaf child before and after implantation. Most of these children experience harm not only because they do not experience success with the cochlear implant, but because they are also not provided with exposure to sign language. But there are a few remedies to help with the issue of language deprivation. Some of those remedies are: recommend sign language, adjust expectations for cochlear implants, coordinate delivery of medical services to the deaf child across the relevant health professions. All children need and deserve an accessible language. This is a biological need. The medical profession must protect the health of deaf children by setting a foundational goal of prevention of linguistic deprivation, which can be achieved via sign language. Cochlear implants do not only involve process or progress in technology, they also involve a biological interface between technology and the human brain. Not only must we find the right way to encode and deliver interpretable information to the brain, we must find the right way to train the brain to decode and interpret that information. This is not easy. Medical professions must begin to expect this road, the cochlear implant road, to be a long, hard journey, and they should not give families the false impression that technology today has advanced to the point where spoken language is easily and rapidly accessed by implanted children. Because there is so much that we cannot predict about what implants do, no child should be implanted unless there is a very strong chance that he or she will have a successful outcome. And because we know that sign language acquisition from an early age leads to normal language acquisition, every deaf child should be raised with sign language as protection against the harm of late first language acquisition. The National Association of Social Work Code of Ethics is guided by these principles: service, social justice, dignity and worth of the person, importance of human relationships, integrity, and competence. A primary care physician who might receive an abnormal newborn hearing screening is likely to send the family of a deaf child to an audiologist and have no further contact with that family regarding the issue. The audiologist then might send the child to a surgeon for a cochlear implant, who likewise has no further contact with the family. The surgeon sends the child to a rehabilitation team that may or may not work with the child for years. Medical insurance in the United States may not cover post-implant rehabilitation sessions, resulting in withdrawals and poor cochlear implant outcomes. Unfortunately, information is too rarely shared among these professionals. Often, there is not a single medical professional who is looking at the chain of treatment interventions and who can respond in a timely and appropriate manner to language development issues. Here, coordination of information and efforts will reduce the likelihood of delay in recognizing the warning signs of linguistic deprivation and of failing to respond before the critical period for language acquisition has passed. As social workers, it is our responsibility to help people in need and address social problems, be mindful of individual differences, cultural and ethnic diversity. In this debate, we should focus on strengthening the relationships between medical professionals, client knowledge, and help clients bridge all other organizations involved. We should advocate for our clients and their best interest. Thank you.